All right, settle in everyone. The United States and Great Britain. Yes, the special relationship. Two nations supposedly joined at the hip by shared history, democratic values, and an unfortunate tendency to enjoy foods that baffle the rest of the world. But let's be honest, that special relationship started with one of the most spectacular, drawn out, and frankly breakups in global history. We're talking slammed doors, thrown tea, and a very firm, it's not me, it's definitely you. Today, however, we're not here to dissect the finer points of parliamentary procedure versus congressional gridlock, or to debate whose version of football is superior. It's ours, obviously. It involves more strategic napping. Oh no. We are diving headfirst into the glorious, sometimes petty, and always entertaining history of America, essentially pulling a series of increasingly audacious fast ones on the once mighty British Empire. We're counting down the top 10 times America outmaneuvered, outsmarted, or just plain outlucked our friends from across the pond. So cancel your afternoon tea, or if you're American, your fourth coffee of the morning. Grab your popcorn, perhaps a beverage that taxed by a distant monarch, because history, my friends, is about to get wonderfully, unapologetically savage. We're talking sneaky spy games that would make James Bond blush, military blunders that became national anthems, and yes, even planting a flag on the literal moon just to rub it in. This is going to be fun, for us anyway. Our story begins, as so many good stories do, with tea. Specifically, overpriced tea. It's December 16th, 1773. The British East India Company, a corporate behemoth that made today's tech giants look like lemonade stands, is teetering on the brink of financial ruin. So what does Parliament do? They pass the Tea Act. Now, this wasn't about making tea expensive for the colonists. Oh no. It was a clever little scheme to make the company's tea then smuggle Dutch tea, thereby forcing Americans to buy it and bail out the company. The American colonists, however, were not, as they say, having it. Enter Samuel Adams and his merry band, the Sons of Liberty. Their plan? Dress up as Mohawk warriors and dump 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. George Washington didn't just fight the British with muskets and cannons. He outspied them with a level of cunning that would make even a modern intelligence agency nod with grudging respect. Enter the Culper spy ring, a clandestine network so secretive, its existence wasn't widely known for over a century. Operating primarily in British-occupied New York from 1778 to 1783, the Culper ring was a surprisingly diverse bunch. Their biggest triumph was exposing Benedict Arnold's plot to hand over West Point to the British. Picture this. December 1776. The American Revolution is not going well. Washington's army is depleted, demoralized, and on the verge of collapse. The British, snug in their winter quarters, are feeling pretty smug, assuming the rebels will just shiver and give up. But George Washington, bless his cotton socks, was not in his right mind. He was in a mind. On Christmas night, in the middle of a raging blizzard, Washington decided to lead 2,400 men across the treacherous ice-choked Delaware River. Meanwhile, in Trenton, New Jersey, about 1,400 Hessian mercenaries were having themselves a merry little Christmas. At around 8 a.m. on December 26th, Washington's frostbitten but determined forces descended upon the hungover Hessians like a very cold, very angry avalanche. The surprise was total. The battle was short, sharp, and brutally effective. Within an hour, it was all over. The Americans suffered remarkably few casualties. The Hessians, on the other hand, had a very bad morning after Christmas. Fast forward to September 1814. The War of 1812 is in full swing, and things are looking a bit dicey for the young American Republic. The British, still a tad miffed about that whole independence thing, had recently sauntered into Washington, D.C., and burned down several public buildings, including the presidential mansion. Next on their Make America Regret Everything tour was Baltimore, and specifically Fort McHenry. The British Navy unleashed a ferocious bombardment on Fort McHenry. For 25 relentless hours, they pounded the fort. Aboard one of the British ships was an American lawyer and amateur poet named Francis Scott Key. By the dawn's early light, the American flag was still there. Inspired, Key scribbled down the verses of a poem that would become the Star-Spangled Banner. All right, let's talk about the Battle of New Orleans. It's January 8th, 1815. The War of 1812 is technically over, but news didn't travel by Twitter. It traveled by very slow boat. The British, unaware, were sending a massive force to seize New Orleans. Waiting for them was Andrew Old Hickory Jackson and his army. Jackson had his men dig in behind Rodriguez Canal, creating a formidable defensive line. When the British finally launched their main assault, they marched forward in neat, orderly, and incredibly exposed formations. The American artillery, much of it manned by Lafitte's pirates, ripped through their ranks. The result was a slaughter, an absolute catastrophe for the British. And then, all this bloodshed, word finally arrived that the war had been over for 2 weeks. By the 1840s, America was feeling its oats, and those oats were increasingly being sown westward. The concept of manifest destiny was all the rage, and one of the shiniest, most desirable patches of land up for grabs was the Oregon Territory. Naturally, both the United States and Great Britain claimed it. The popular slogan of the day became 5440 or Fight Enter President James K. Polk, a shrewd operator. Polk talked tough, but privately let it be known that a compromise along the 49th parallel would be acceptable. The British, keen to avoid an unnecessary conflict, eventually agreed. In 1846, the Oregon Treaty was signed, peacefully dividing the territory along the 49th parallel. World War I, the Great War, a catastrophic European meat grinder that America had managed to mostly avoid for the first few years. But by early 1917, Germany was getting desperate. Their brilliant idea, unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmermann telegram. In January 1917, German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann sent a top-secret, coded telegram to the German ambassador in Mexico. Germany proposed a military alliance with Mexico if the United States entered the war on the side of the Allies. British intelligence intercepted and decrypted this little bombshell of a telegram. The reaction in America was exactly what the British had hoped for. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. By 1940, Britain was in a very, very tight spot. Nazi Germany was rampaging across Europe, France had fallen, and the Battle of Britain was raging in the skies. Britain was standing alone, and critically, it was running out of money and supplies. President Franklin D. Roosevelt knew that a Nazi-dominated Europe was a profound threat to American interests. So he came up with the Lend-Lease Act. The concept was like lending your neighbor a garden hose if their house is on fire. The Lend-Lease Act, passed in March 1941, allowed the U.S. to supply Britain with vast quantities of war material. By the end of the war, the U.S. had provided over $50 billion in Lend-Lease aid. This supercharged the American economy and cemented America's rise to global dominance. Britain emerged from the war massively in debt to the United States. July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin become the first humans to walk on the moon. The Cold War space race was at its zenith, and America had just delivered the ultimate cosmic mic drop. While the primary opponent in the space race was the USSR, the moon landing also served as a rather spectacular, if unspoken, flex on Great Britain. Here was America, the former upstart colony, now literally planting its flag on another celestial body. The stars and stripes on the lunar surface declared that America had reached a new frontier. The British Empire, once the empire on which the sun never set, now watched as their former colonists took field trips to the moon. The plaque left on the lunar lander read, "We came in peace for all mankind." But you can't help but feel there was an unspoken addendum. P.S. Remember 1776? Well, look at us now. Game, set, and match, America. And finally, we arrive at number one, the big one, the historical hustle that started it all, the American Revolution itself. Let's be brutally honest here, on paper, this should never have happened. You had 13 disparate, often squabbling colonies, with no real standing army, no navy to speak of, and a deeply ingrained suspicion of centralized authority. Their opponent? The British Empire, the 18th century equivalent of a global juggernaut. The Americans employed unconventional, ungentlemanly guerrilla tactics and received crucial foreign assistance. By 1783, after years of grueling warfare, a weary King George III and his government were forced to sign the Treaty of Paris, formally recognizing the independence of the United States of America. The upstarts had won. So there you have it. 10 times America, with a combination of cunning, audacity, a bit of luck, and the occasional well-aimed cannonball, managed to get one over on our esteemed British cousins. From revolutionary spies and Christmas Day ambushes to national anthems born from bombardment and literal moon flags, it's been quite a ride through the more competitive aspects of the special relationship. The question remains, though, who do you think played who the hardest? Was it Washington's shadowy Culper Ring, running circles around British intelligence? Was it Andrew Jackson's ragtag army delivering that brutal post-war beatdown in New Orleans? Or perhaps it's the simple, ongoing act of America just existing, thriving, and occasionally reminding the world that yes, we did indeed win that breakup back in 1776. I want to hear your hottest takes, your most controversial opinions. Drop them in the comments below. Let the great Anglo-American debate rage anew. And hey, if you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane, if you found yourself chuckling at Britain's expense, it's okay, they can take it, probably. Then do us a favor and absolutely smash that like button. Share it with your friends, especially your British friends. Because let's be honest, nothing seems to trigger a certain segment of the British public quite like unironic American success and a gentle reminder of historical L's. Don't forget to subscribe for more historical deep dives and geopolitical shenanigans. Until next time, keep your tea in the cup and your flags flying high.